We are live from Beltline, from the Broadway Makers Marketplace. I'm Lauren Van Hemert, off camera this morning because I have two handsome gentlemen to be on camera and who are going to make some music for us. But I am the host of the Beltline to Broadway podcast and one of the makers here at the Broadway Makers Marketplace. And I am so excited to sit with James Sasser and Vince Burwell, Sasser and Burwell, the writing team. And we're going to talk about all the things. And of course, if you are watching us live on Facebook or YouTube or all the places, you can interact with us, ask questions, and we will take any questions we have time for. So welcome, guys. Thanks for being here with me. Thanks for hanging out today.
Pleasure. This is awesome.
Yeah, exciting.
It's very cool. It's a hub for fans by fans.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's talk about the writing team. I interviewed James during the pandemic.
Yeah.
It seems like a while back now, and we talked about how you both met, how you became Burwell and Sasser. But how did you guys meet? When did the writing collaboration begin?
Oh, wonderful. We met at NYU. We were both in grad school at NYU's Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program. I think that's right.
Yeah,
Graduate Musical Theater Writers Program at Tisch. And at that point in time, it was the only program of its sort that awarded degrees. And so we were working on our MFAs. And I'd say as soon as I met James, and I heard, James, and we met, we knew early that we wanted to work together, I think, because we were mid-career writers. We had a career in the field for a bit before going back to grad school.
As performers,
and which had put us in a certain age group.
Yeah.
And then when we got to know each other, we have so many things in common. Aside from obviously, our apperances are a little bit.
I was going to say, you're amazingly handsome individuals,
Right,
amazingly talented individuals.
Well, one of the biggest things we connected on is we both grew up in military families. So shout out to everyone for Veterans Day today.
Yeah,
Thank
here
you
we
very
are
much
on
for your
Veterans
service.
Day.
And we realized that we had lived in a lot of the same places, but never at the same time over our lives on various bases and stuff.
A military brat life is a very particular thing.
Yeah.
So when we come up, military brat, what what service? Air Force, Army, and to that end, when we were finishing up grad school and we had written our thesis, which we collaborated on, we chose each other as partners. Our fathers got along and mothers got along famously because of what we just
shared
mentioned.
vocabulary.
Yeah.
It's a shared language and it's a very specific experience. And I would say it's really influenced your music because your music has a very international, global, culturally conscious spirit to it, which is what I love. Yes.
Want to be our publicist?
Hey, well, I'll have my people come here.
Fantastic.
But I do like that the writing aspect of it. When I was listening to the Cubamor pieces, it sounds different than typical theater, Broadway, commercial sound that I think we all kind of get used to.
I mean, it was something that I think we strove. Like when Vince introduced me to the film Cubamor that the musical's based on, I said to him, "Look, if we're gonna do this, I have to know what Havana smells and sounds and feels like." So I ended up getting us a grant from the State Department and NYU's Office of Globalization, and we went to Havana for 2 weeks, and that definitely influenced not just the story, but certainly the styles of music that we use to tell that. Yeah. So
and it makes a difference. And shout out to Joshua Bialafia, who created the film that we referenced for Cubamor. Brilliant filmmaker. But because we had traveled a lot, we realized that we travel well together, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because this is a
That's a
relationship.
special thing. That's
Very
a
special thing.
special thing right there.
Very special thing. So, and it is a lot. It's like being in a relationship. Our significant others would say, "Oh, that's your husband," and I'm
Your
like, "Oh,
husband.
well, you know, more or less." I mean, we disagree pretty well most of the time.
We often argue, and then we'll flip sides in the argument just to argue the other side to make sure that we're actually really getting down to
Making
the
sense.
nitty gritty of it. Yeah.
And then we'll get an international drink.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's all good.
So, yeah.
Which is so appropriate because we're in this, repurposed bar space right now.
Fantastic.
So it feels, kind of good.
It's very
Vibe.
festive.
Very New York too.
Very New York.
Yeah.
You talked about the Cubamor movie, and I want to stop there for a second because Cubamor and Bottle Shock are movies. Bottle Shock is certainly a cult favorite. I was telling James, people in Raleigh are very excited about the Bottle Shock musical because somebody was writing about it on my Facebook recently about the film, and I said, "Oh, do you know there's a musical
Coming soon.
coming soon?" So when you're adapting a work that's made for the screen, and we're seeing it a lot on Broadway now with Doubtfire, Tootsie, all of these film properties that are becoming stage adaptations. What are the challenges there?
We have a theory.
Okay.
What makes a movie musical adaptation work? And this is something that we've sort of teased out in working with something like Bottle Shock, especially. And Cubamor was interesting too, because Cubamor was almost a documentary in its style. So we had to sort of craft a different narrative than what was in the film version. But if a movie is too iconic, there are certain things that it is going to do really well that are not really going to work on stage. And also vice versa. There's certain things that theater does really well, that doesn't work in a film. So it's sort of finding those landmines and avoiding them, if you will, and then finding the moments that you can really tease out in a theatrical setting that might not necessarily be there. The biggest of which is that, when somebody sings in a musical, it's often the most heightened emotional state that they're going to be in. Whereas in a movie, that moment might go by in 2 or 3 seconds.
Yes.
But you've got to fill out a 3 to however long minute song you want. A good example of that is in Bottle Shock when Gustavo quits, and he has that moment where he has that big confrontation with Bill, his boss, with Bo and the Barrett family, not Bill Pullman the actor, but we realized that was our end of Act 1 closer. So we wrote this gigantic 70s style power rock song for the Gustavo character to close our Act 1. Yeah. And
you are also a TV script writer. Yeah. You have a TV script that is making headlines.
Making some rounds.
Some rounds. Does it help because you've worked in that medium when you're translating something from screen to stage?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because there are different rules. It's partly a pacing thing and partly a formatting thing. But I think in terms of structure, certainly most of the work that we do and that I come back to in all of the writing that we do, it is character driven. So in that sense, if we are really fully fleshing out the characters and are invested in their narrative, then absolutely. It's just a different constraint often.
It's a different thing.
Yeah.
Although
medium.
we've all been staring at our screens for 20 plus months now. So.
Yeah.
Vince, I asked James this when I interviewed him before. At what point did you have the aha moment that you were a writer, that you were an artist?
I'm fortunate. I learned very early because everything else I did, I'm not going to say the bad word, but I completely screwed up. I tell people that it's not something that I became, it's something that I just was. And so my process has been developing craft.
Mm.
And so that's been my journey, developing craft, because talent or desire or, that's your calling can only take you so far in this field, particularly at the highest level, which is the worlds that we are in with Broadway or with theater and things like that. So I always knew. That said, because I've always known, the celebrity aspect of this field is less enticing than the actual doing of it. And it's interesting because my day job, I'm a professor of theater at the Boston Conservatory at Berkeley. And when you're at the conservatory at Berkeley, you just have opportunities that are unique. So I got the opportunity to interview. I had Connick Jr. sit in on my audition techniques class, which,
That's awesome.
that's pretty.
Not a bad gig. Not a bad gig.
Not a bad gig
At all.
But and so speaking with Harry, I can call him Harry. Wow. Speaking with Harry Connick Jr., who's going to be Daddy, Mr. Warbucks in the upcoming
NBC
Annie,
Live.
who is supreme. We know his talent is legendary, and his craft. That he respects the craft of what he does, and those who commit to that, as much or more so than the pomp and circumstance and the celebrity. And it's because he was born into this. He loves it for what it is. And so I've always loved it for what it is. And James and I are doing that. And that's something that we could bond over. Yeah.
It's so interesting. When I interviewed Jason Robert Brown, he also is really just an artist, just a musician. And when I kind of talked to him about this business and this career he's carved out for himself, he said something similar. He's like, my favorite part is just getting together and making noise with other musicians.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not the celebrity. And that's what I think separates the longevity careers versus the flash in the pan you hear about it once.
I mean, as frustrating as developing a new piece can be sometimes, I know we've talked about how a lot of our favorite moments are in the rehearsal studio. It's that the process is really where it's at. It's where the magic happens. It's where the discovery happens. I certainly feel like we've done some of our best writing and edits when we're in that early part of this process. And we can't do that without other musicians and actors and performers.
Yeah. There's nothing quite, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's nothing quite so sacred to me as the theater when the audience is not there.
Yeah. Well said.
It's like a cathedral.
It's like a shrine.
It's a cathedral. Yeah, it's a shrine.
Yeah.
And so being in there when the audience is not there and walking between the seats or listening to somebody counting out 5, 6, 7, 8, or the musicians warming up, or somebody like coming up with now an iPad, but it used to be like a folder or a clipboard and walk up and say, we need to cut bars here, or something like that. That is even more exciting than the show itself. The show itself, if it's our show, I'm a wreck. I'm the worst audience member either. James will say, to the back we go. And we'll sit behind the last seat because I'm watching it like this. I'm horrible. But
I get more nervous watching our work than performing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
Oh yeah.
Because we've been trained to be a performer.
Right.
Yeah.
We've been trained to be composers and writers too.
You know how to ride that adrenaline,
but
in a different way.
You're not in control anymore.
Yeah.
When you're in it, you feel like you have some control over which way things go, but when you have to sit there, it's like a parent. My baby goes to school. I pray that my child comes back. And it's that type of feeling.
What I love about what you're speaking to is I think young people, I've got a couple of young people in my house, so I can speak about this. You're a professor, you work with young people. We're always so, the young ones are always so focused on the finished product. I think lose sight of the process. So I love how you're speaking to the creative process, because that is, and maybe that's what COVID taught all of us, is to kind of savor that process a little bit, because there was no finished product.
I just recently, having gone back into a rehearsal process, I had forgotten that sense of discovery and that I'd totally taken it for granted. And it was really beautiful to rediscover that discovery, if that makes sense. You know?
Well, speaking of that, you just played Emile Debec.
I did.
An iconic role in South Pacific.
Finally graduated.
Finally graduated.
So I played Lieutenant Cable a long time ago.
So how was it returning to the stage post-COVID?
It was amazing. So this was with Plaza Theatricals, a brand new first equity company in Nassau County, just 30 minutes outside of New York and Long Island.
And they have a pretty fabulous season. So you got to look them up.
We had a 16-piece orchestra that was music directed by the incredible music director Alex Harrington, who's involved with a bunch of Broadway shows. Really just, first off, the cast was so grateful to be in a room doing it together, but the audiences were so grateful as well. And like Broadway shows here, you know, people had to be masked and vaccinated to attend, but there was this sense of we're all coming back together to create this together in a way that I had not felt in a very, very, very long time, even pre-COVID. And also it was amazing how much, and in a few ways a little sad, how much South Pacific is still so relevant to what's going on in American society today.
Yes.
So that to me, and Vince and I have used South Pacific in a lot of our teaching materials. I think we talked about this in the interview too, about
we did.
When you describe the plot of South Pacific, most people forget the issues that are really at stake, of what's really going on in the show. They just remember all the romantic songs. Right?
Yeah,
But it's really incredible how deeply involved in all the aspects of the American identity and psyche they were able to dive in, Rodgers and Hammerstein, with that material.
It's amazing and sad, like you're saying, how some of these older properties, some of them are just problematic and real, but a piece like South Pacific is just timeless in its themes and how it speaks to us now. And I'm finding, just returning to the theater, that everything is hitting me different now. There's something more intense about the theatrical experience and joyful. And the electricity feels different in the room. Nothing like it. That's why I love live theater so much. You've penned several musicals. You've got several more in the works, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But Cubamor and Bottle Shop we talked about. I feel like your sound is infused with all these global colors, global layers, which I love. How would you describe your musical style?
It's hard to do. I mean, I think that we kind of we repeat what other people say. So rest assured, we'll say, oh, it's a global thing at some point. But the story dictates the music. And because we tell stories that are rooted in a particular time, in a particular space, in a particular culture, we try to do as much research and lean into that as much as possible. And I think because we're military brats and because we've traveled a good bit and we've been raised in different places, we can pull from a vocabulary that we have had access to. Many, many moons before James and I went to Cuba for research, I had performed in Cuba. I performed in Santiago de Cuba, and one of the reasons why this story resonated is because I experienced a significant aspect of it, and so I can pull from a part of myself. The spiritual traditions that are referenced in Cubamor are spiritual traditions that I'm a part of. So I pull from that. Classic rock. James and I, interesting fun fact, when we talk about Bottle Shock, James lived in Napa and I lived in Sonoma, or Petaluma technically, which is not nearly as glamorous as Napa on paper, but it is quite charming. And so it was us going back to our roots, and so we could reference the Bay Area culture,
Northern California rock from the 70s, which is just this unique little moment in time, and late 60s, Grateful Dead, Santana, all these incredible acts that we could draw from.
Yeah, it's a part of us.
Yeah.
And so we tend not to pick write shows that we have to figure out a way into. We write shows that we already have a way into.
That are a part of us.
They're a part of us already. And it allows us to be a little bit more honest, because a dishonest artist, audiences can tell.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can tell when the piece is from a place of authenticity, genuineness, as an audience member, as a theater lover, when it's not.
Yeah.
So do you want to, since we keep talking about the music, do you want to take a music break and
Sure.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's just another shot.
Yeah, why not? All right.
So set it up.
So there's a moment in the film, perfect example of that we looked at, that it goes by really quickly in the movie, but it's a moment where Bo, the young kind of screw up in the story, he has a confrontation with his dad, and he's just really embarrassed by it. And Samantha, who goes by Sam, who is the winery intern, and in our version of the story, she's a master's student of enology at UC Davis. We've definitely expanded her role as more of a representation of female winemakers in the 70s and much later, which for the longest time has been a boys' club, kind of similar to theater in a way. But she has a moment where she basically looks at him and just levels with him about why she does what she does and why she loves what she does. And for her, it's about a memory. So this is Summer in a Bottle. It's the sunlight, it's the rain. If you don't get it, I don't know how to explain. It's more than just time in a bottle, giving me each summer in a bottle. It's laughter through tears, memories I piled high throughout the years. I save them for when I get knocked down. And if it's time to move on, I'll skip town. But I'll keep each summer in a bottle, giving me each summer in a bottle. Each sip is laughter by a fire. I know you feel it too, the deeper stirring of desire. All the good things you feel before they're gone. If you bottle them, then they can live on. So you don't forget the faces or the places you don't want to let go. I don't want to let go. Do you want to let go? I don't want to let go. It's each moment that you seize, carpe diem or whatever you please. Someday I'll find a little spot of land and be proud of the vintage I make with my own hand. Until then I'll collect, so when I'm old I can resurrect each summer, each season, each sunset. I will keep them all in a bottle, giving me each summer in a bottle, giving me each summer in a bottle, giving me each summer in a bottle.
Woo! Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, it's been a minute. The notes get higher, don't they?
They do. They do.
That was great. Thank you. I feel like my cup is full for the rest of the day just from that. And we have more music to come. So James, since our first interview, the world has changed
Yeah.
significantly.
Yeah.
And we've seen this rising up
Mhm.
in the, we see white American theater movement. Vince, you are a professor, as you mentioned.
Mhm.
When I've spoken to other academics, other people involved in the theater industry, a lot of them have said that the anti-racism that we want to see, that starts at the academic level. If we're going to create a theater industry that's anti-racist, it has to start at the academic level. Do you agree with that?
To a large degree, yeah. I think that the response is shared, because, and I think that you can start at the top and you can start at the academic level, and no one side can control the narrative. But if you're coming from the top, from Broadway down, you're coming from the schools and the academy up, then you can meet in the middle. And I think that's what we want to do, so that we can have a conversation, because there are those who are on Broadway or are producers and things like that. And as we also have a life as investors and producers as well. And so it's driven by commerce, and commerce is commerce. And some people say that you can tell how a demographic or a community feels by what they spend their money on. So that there is an aspect to that as well. But at the academic level, I think that we have to assess and diagnose what the issues are and change the mindset of the people who are moving up through it, so that those who become future producers, future directors, as well as future performers, are operating from a greater sense of how the field affects everybody across the board.
Mhm.
And these are conversations that that the theater world has been afraid to have, because they don't want to lose the money. They want to appeal to as many people, the cross section of America. And we have to remember that much of Broadway is funded by those big states in the middle. And so even if the theaters exist on the coast.
Mhm.
So it's saying, okay, these children who grow up watching, High School Musical, or these shows that, and they're bit by the theater bug, that they can come to a place like the Boston Conservatory at Berkeley and say, yes, Wicked is wonderful. Yes, these shows are wonderful. But let's expand the narrative. And,
Yes.
and when you expand the narrative, when they come to school, then they go out into the field with a greater world sense, and they're greater citizens who are creating more inclusive theater. And I think that being an academic at the intersection of that is gratifying for me as a person of color, but specifically a Black man, a person of African descent, and all of the politic and narrative that comes with that I am now beginning to see work that reflect me. See, I didn't jump into musical theater when I came out of school. I went to become a rock star, even though I was trained to be a musical theater person and to sing opera and stuff like that, things like that. But I didn't jump into the field because I wasn't well represented. And now we're getting to a point where I can feel a little bit better about being represented. And we're not there. We're just now beginning to have the conversation. So it's a long way
Just
to go.
scratch the surface.
But we're having those hard conversations. And I think the Academy is where we have to make continue making concerted efforts to do that. And dear white American theater, really shook that jump-started that into gear, because it was something that was largely necessary, so that we can have those conversations.
My hope is, and my hope and fear is that as we're experiencing this cultural shift and having these conversations, that it isn't a season of reckoning, that it is a permanent reckoning. And that's where I get a little nervous that we've all been woke in this moment, but what's going to happen 2 seasons from now, 3 seasons from now?
Well, I mean, a big part of that responsibility, the writers need to continue to address that. And I think new work, and this is a soapbox that we share quite often, but if new work is not being created that represents these narratives, then the producers and the theaters and the regional theaters don't have the opportunity to produce it. So we have to be responsible within the writing and producing community of really, I don't want to say taking those risks, but in making sure that it gets done. And making sure that it has the resources to continue the conversation.
And audiences need to demand the new work as well.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's great to see Hello Dolly or Steel Magnolias. No more Steel Magnolias, please. But it's great, those familiar titles.
Sure. South Pacific, good
there's
example.
There's nothing more gratifying than seeing a new work and seeing it for the first time.
Agreed.
You know, and seeing how it evolves.
Yeah, agreed.
Audiences have got to do it. So
I think the Academy can and should play a large part in that. And asking those questions and poking the bear a bit and saying the works that we do are not based on making money. Their purpose is to educate the students in craft and in mentality. So there's risk that can be taken.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take those risks so that the work that is wearing cultural iconic clothes like a dashiki doesn't end up wearing figuratively khakis and a blue blazer. And that's
I was thinking Banana Republic, so you nailed that. Yeah.
I like Banana Republic. but a piece doesn't have to be super woke, and this is the woke when woke was a good word and didn't get twisted into a word of condescension. But it's all of the things in between. I can write an Afro-Cuban show, but I can also write a show about wine, which is not
right.
It's a show about wine.
Yeah, early in our career, we had trouble getting producers to understand our aesthetic because I don't think we knew what it was either. Yeah. But at the same time, what the through line with all of that is just authentic representation and experience. And ultimately, whether it's a classically influenced story or rock and roll or Afro-Cuban and hip hop, that's what we drive toward. Is if it feels authentic and we're representing people the way they would choose to be represented, not in some glamorized or exoticized way, then that to me seems to like next evolution in the kind of musicals that we can bring
or
to life.
Even traumatized ways, because I think when we talk about marginalized communities or we talk about representation on stage, we all love watching the trauma. Why can't we just celebrate joy of different lived experiences? So
we talk about this a lot, and that was one of the things behind should we share the news now for the commission?
Don't jump in.
So we received a wonderful commission from Manhattan School of Music to write, which we thought was going to be a workshop, but then due to COVID, they ended up filming a movie version of the Compte Noir.
A whole movie.
Yes. We hadn't even written it yet.
It was stressful.
So we wrote the musical in about 3 months, and the incredible students at Manhattan School of Music's musical theater program with director Katie Davis, who is fantastic.
Brilliant.
And choreographer and filmmaker Andre Zachary, also brilliant. They crafted this beautiful, it's almost like a French experimental film in some ways. We didn't know what it was going to be, and it was kind of wonderful to watch this process. But that story was about Thomas Alexander Dumas, the general who was the father of Alexander Dumas, the novelist of Three Musketeers fame, etc.
Who was a man of color.
Yes. And at the heart of that story about authenticity representation, there was a character that Vince fought really hard for. He wanted the musical to be about the Chevalier du Saint-Georges.
He's just such a complexly amazing, awesome character. And I believe it's HBO Max or Netflix. I'm not sure. So
there's a movie coming, forthcoming.
There's a movie coming.
We'll find it.
Yes.
Yeah. So the initial pushback on it was that the first chapter of the Chevalier's life is incredible. He becomes the director of the Paris Opera. He's fighting sword duels. He's a virtuoso violinist. Unfortunately, he gets caught up in some not so great stuff after the revolution and ends up dying sort of in infamy. And so it would have been hard to work that into our Dumas musical. It would have ended up being a 5-hour show.
Yeah.
Cut to a few months ago, we got an inquiry from the Lamplighters Music Theater in San Francisco, which I believe is the country's oldest Gilbert and Sullivan. If not, they're one of the oldest Gilbert and Sullivan producing companies in the country. But they, for the first time in their 70-year history, are commissioning a new operetta. And we have been given this incredible opportunity. And so Vince is finally getting his chance to write a piece about the Chevalier Saint-Georges.
Careful what you ask for.
Exactly.
Moral of the story.
Moral of the story.
But it's a great honor, yeah.
Yeah, and we're really excited. We're going to concentrate. So this goes back to what you were saying, Lauren. We're going to concentrate on an earlier chapter in the Chevalier's life to celebrate this incredible artist who influenced Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, really kept the sort of the art of courtly romance and music alive toward the end of the Revolution. And we're excited. It's called By Georges, A Day in the Life of the Chevalier, legendary Chevalier de Saint-Georges. And it will follow his travails in trying to find a patron to pay for his new opera at the Paris Opera. Something that, we as artists probably can't relate to at all.
Not at all.
We spend more time raising money than we do actually writing.
Development.
Yes.
Well, there's a whole business side of this industry that is a conversation for a whole other day.
Yeah, no one wants to see how the sausage gets made.
No, nobody.
But that's exciting. So kind of estimated time of arrival for that?
We will probably do the first sit down in the spring, and then we'll get a couple of workshops. And I think they're looking at it for the late 2022, 2023 season. So we have, actually, thank goodness, we have some time to be able to work on it and develop it.
But time goes fast when you have a deadline. So, boy, do I know that. Yeah.
What has COVID taught you both about the creative process and about yourselves as artists?
I think that I learned the value of time, life, and experience. There are people who we were very close to who are now no longer with us because of COVID. With theaters closed and being shut down, and this is something that you devoted your life to, there's an ache, there's a hurt there. There is the how do I make a living thing, but it's like somebody has been taken from that you love, the community, the art has been taken from you, and we have to and then we have to be, as Bruce Lee would say, or actually, is it Sun Tzu? Sun Tzu. You have to be formless. You have to be like water. You have to be formless. If you have a process, you have to be able to alter your process for the obstacle ahead of you.
Absolutely.
So as we've recognized, we have to figure out Zoom. We have to figure out how to collaborate remotely,
Virtually,
and maintain that relationship. And it's hard because writing can be writing these shows can be a intimate process, or it can be a communal one. So if you require community, it can be difficult. So there's so many aspects of COVID that taught us more about ourselves and who we are as writers and who we are as humans. And I think that is going to have an impact on the work that we write moving forward and the way that we work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I coming back to what you said about community too, I like with what's happening with Bottle Shock. We have a reading and a concert coming up in May at California Center for the Arts. The wheel sometimes moves very slowly, and sometimes the wheel you can't even keep track of how fast it's moving. And I think one of the differences between working in theater versus working in a medium like film, where film is really hyper condensed, a lot of things happen in a very small amount of time, and then it's done. Whereas I really feel that the relativity, not to get all quantum physical about it, but the relativity of the energy and flow of theater ebbs and flows. 1 minute it's a particle, 1 minute it's a wave. And you have to just accept that and know that the energy is going to come where you put the attention, and you have to trust that there's going to be somebody down the road that you meet off of a Zoom reading who then says, hey, you've got this musical about wine. Why don't you come to Southern California and we do it? And that happened to be Jeremy Scott Lapp, who's the incredible assistant director on Prince of Egypt, and he's shepherding Bottle Shock for us now. And I met him doing a reading of a new No Coward musical on Zoom, which was incredible. So you never know what energy or what person is going to open countless doors. And I think I intellectually knew that, but I hadn't really taken stock with that until I had time to slow down and look at it.
And Cubamor had a life during COVID as well, because there was a virtual production, a virtual concert of that with an amazing cast of people. So very exciting.
I kind of have to give a shout out. Vince was talking about people that we lost recently, but Doreen Montalvo, who was our original Oshun, and there's a wonderful, almost a memorial to her here with Paciente Fe and all of that. And how game everybody was to make that happen, because we originally were going to have that concert at Joe's Pub. And I think we announced the concert and then everything shut down, like a week later?
Yeah.
And
we didn't know how long it was going to be. We thought the quarantine might be a few weeks. We didn't know it was going to be a few years, a few months, and forever. And so we learned how to roll with the punches, and it's hard. Cubamor, it's a family. Everybody who's done Cubamor, for the best of reasons and for not so much the best of reasons. I mean, many of our family of Cubamor is largely folks from the Heights and from Hamilton.
Hamiltonians.
Because there are only so many roles for people of certain backgrounds and demographics. And so there's a family that extends beyond Cubamor, but Cubamor is a part of the narrative.
A part of that.
It is. And so, and they come back, and when we ask, hey, would you? Yes, of course, we support you. And when you have actors that support us as writers, it's really, really powerful, so that we could make something like that happen when Zoom was completely new. And shout out to the folks over at Theater C,
Carlos Ernesto,
for making that happen.
Which they have an incredible show right now called Odd Man Out, which if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's an experience of New York from the perspective of a person who's sight impaired, and it's mind-blowing, and it's really wonderful.
I love recommendations. Like I said, I'll probably have to come back in December, so I'll have to
come see
check it out.
Please do.
And we'll to tag on what you were saying too, it's been awesome watching so many of our Cubamor family had their careers explode, and then we got a little nervous because we were asking people to come do this little Zoom concert, and everybody said yes.
But they came back.
It was such an honor, for the story and the show, because we've learned something from each of them that they brought to these characters, and it's carried through in every incarnation of Cubamor.
I love that so much. People can see clips of Cubamor on your website. When we repost this later, I will include all the links. Follow them on socials so you can see all the great stuff. Lamplighters, they gave a shout out. They're thrilled about that. So follow Lamplighters on social also, so that you know when the bird is coming. Do you want to play another song, and then we'll wrap up?
This will take us back into the conversation of shall we say responsibility in media?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So we do like to make sure that our music is relative to what's going on today. So sometimes it's tongue in cheek, and sometimes it's just a tip of the hat.
Yeah.
So I'm going to preface this with, I have never played this song. I wrote
World premiere.
I wrote it and then put it in the hands of people who could actually play it better than I could. And it was arranged by the wonderful folks over at Andrew Gurley and folks over at Film Station. So they cleaned up my mess. So bear with me.
It's a world premiere.
World premiere. Listen to James's beautiful voice.
So in this, we realized something interesting in working in the Compte Noir, and it's kind of like what we were saying about South Pacific. There was a lot of stuff going on in the world around the French Revolution and Napoleon that was a little too eerily like what's been going on lately in America. And Napoleon really was the first master of turning bad press into good press. And in the course of our story, he sort of blamed the failure of the Egyptian campaign on a number of people. One of those things fell on Alexander Dumas' father. But during the course of it, Napoleon had this amazing way of turning devastating failures into amazing accomplishments for him. And this is what that song is about. So we're going to start kind of in the middle. But this song is called Fake News, sung by Napoleon Bonaparte.
1, 2, 1, 2.
All of the truth and freedom racket, attack it. Victory, glory, mass appeal. A republic isn't real. Just a distraction, a demigod's dance, if given half a chance. But they'll always kneel for whatever they think they feel. Men like us control the story, more power than glory. There's no difference, fact or fiction. It's interdiction with the power to manhandle the minions and sell what's what. Tell them which way to go, and they will blindly go. The dog and pony show. It's all fake news. Everything you've ever read was put by something in your head. Everything that you believe, you chose it. Don't be so naive. All fake news. It's not complete defeat. It's a tactical retreat. All fake news. So easy to abuse. All fake news. Time to pay your dues. Fake news. Fake news.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
So for people watching at home who just want more and more and more of this, because I know everybody's going to want more, talk about what's available on Broadway On Demand. Talk about where they can find and hear more of your music.
Cool. BroadwayOnDemand.com is a good place. We've got videos from Cubamor and Bottle Shock there. And there's going to be a ton more of the Compte Noir coming out. A series of about probably 7 or 8 music videos that are cuts from the original movie, if you will. We're also going to be releasing some more Bottle Shock demos online soon. That'll be in conjunction with what's going on at California Center for the Arts in Escondido. And that reading will be in early May. So for more info on that, you can sign up to our list at burwellandsasser.com or follow us on Facebook.
Absolutely. And we will put tags and links and all of the things. Thank you both for being here with me.
Thank you.
My mobile studio in NYC. I feel so fancy.
It's beautiful. It's amazing. Love it.
Thank you both. And everyone, come back at 2:00. We're going to be talking to Ken, who is the dramaturge from Hadestown. And we'll be talking about Hadestown and Disney and all of the things. So I will see you all at 2. I have to remember what time I'm talking. At 2 p.m. Oh, amazing.